Stead, Park Superintendent with the Hayward Area Recreation and Park District. And thank you very much for inviting us here tonight to give you a little bit of an update on not only on what's been happening since the last time we were here with respect to the San Lorenzo Community Park redevelopment, but I also have some other information that I would like to let you all know about. But first of all, we are continuing, since the master plan was approved for the development or renovation of San Lorenzo Community Park, with that process. The district has been under contract with the architect who's been working on the plans and specifications development. That process is continuing. We have basically, well, he's completed approximately 60% drawings, as they call it in the industry, which we are currently looking at and providing, input to the architect. The other thing that we have done is, as part of the county process, we're required to file a request for a conditional use permit. And this is under the county process. It's separate from what HARD went through the community process with the master plan and so forth. Because it is a park, their ordinance requires a conditional use permit for the new design and construction. It is my understanding that a senior planner, Rodrigo Ordonia, will be here at the next meeting in May. He could not be here tonight to speak specifically on the county CUP process. Many of you may be, aware of it, but it's basically another public process, so the community has an opportunity to see what is being proposed, and it's vetted through the county. As I said, Rodrigo will be here next month. So that's basically where we are. The other thing that also has been going on is the review and process of an EIR. So the district also hired a consultant to go through all of the impacts. That is still going on. They're still studying that. They've been out a couple of times for traffic studies, and they're looking at all the environmental effects that might come about from the renovation. Some great news that I would like to report is at a board meeting time before last, the board approved going forward with what's called a COP. It's a financing form of financing. It's called certificates of participation, and that's in the amount of $15 million, and up to $8 million of that is earmarked for the first phase of the development of San Lorenzo Community Park. And I think all of you should be very pleased with that. That is an enormous commitment on the part of the HARD Board of Directors. The other $7 million, 5.6 approximately, will be used to purchase the 24 acres of parkland in Castro Valley with the old East Bay Mud Redwood filter plant parcels. That escrow will be closing at the end of this month. And then depending on what's remaining, there hopefully will be some money to fund some of the development of the Fairmont Terrace Park. So those are both two areas that are, close to San Lorenzo also, and just wanted to be sure that you were all aware of this commitment by our board. The debt service on that is about $1 million per year. So if you borrow 15 and it costs you about $30 million, it's over a 30-year period. Some of the other things I'd like to talk to you about is what we've been doing in some of the San Lorenzo parks over the last year or so. I'm sure many of you have noticed the exterior painting of the community center at San Lorenzo Park. We've also painted the interior. That's both the hallways and the large multi-use room, and we also did some wainscoting in that room also. and installed some LED lighting also. So that's been happening. And then we just recently completed the kitchen upgrade, and I welcome you all to come, visit and look at the new upgraded kitchen with granite countertops, new cabinets, new floor, new appliances. So it's available for renting anytime you want. So that's what's been going on at San Lorenzo Community Park. Mervyn Morris, we went through our preliminary budget process just recently, and currently in the plans for next year is the replacement of the restroom at Mervyn Morris. That would be a restroom similar to the one we already installed at San Lorenzo a year and a half ago. Actually, I guess it's almost 2 years now. And then finally, Delray Park, the sand that was in the play area, or one of the play areas, was replaced last year with new ADA landing material. So those are just some of the things that have been going on, and the announcement on our certificate of occupancy, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have or the community.
I'm just glad there was some funding. That was always the issue, was here's the plans, and it was like, okay, and when would there be money? So I am pleased to hear that there is some funding. I'm sorry,
Right,
the financing is so high.
No, I understand, but there's times where you have to take one step at a time, and there's lots of examples of this where some grant money may be available or something like that for a shovel-ready project. And the best recent example of that is at Holland Park in the Ashland area, where we happened to have a shovel-ready project there, and we ended up getting about $150,000 of additional money just because we had a project that qualified for some of the environmental cleanup there. So that helped that project get kickstarted. So again, once we have the plans and specs, then, this first $8 million can be used to start the first phase and complete the first phase, and hopefully that will, garner additional funds in the future.
So, thank you again. I love this plan. Just a question about what you were talking about, phases and timelines and stuff like that. Can you explain what phase one is and what the completion date is?
In general terms, because I'm not sure we know exactly yet until the engineers have completely designed all the infrastructure. The original estimate for the project based on just the master plan, which is, the best guess by the architects, was between $12 and $15 million for the entire San Lorenzo Community Center park renovation. They identified some possible phasing. The first phase, I'm sure, will include, almost positively include the filling in of the existing pond and the erection of the softball complex, as well as the marsh area and the new pond area. And then also a lot of the underground utilities and those sorts of things that have to be put in to be able to do the future phases. That's estimated at this point $7 to $8 million. Once the plans and specs have been completely developed, then estimators that the architect have can more accurately estimate what the actual costs are going to be. And then ultimately, it's when we go out for bid where we, really find out what the, first phase is going to cost.
And you get when the first phase would end approximately?
Right now, because of softball, we're looking hopefully right after softball ends in 2015. So a little more than a year from now, we would probably go out to bid, hopefully winter, early spring of 2015.
Looking at the plans, can I inquire, are the fields going to be lighted?
Is your mic on?
This is the older plan. This is older, this is from our August meeting.
Well, that's fairly close to what it is, except this little additional pond area will not be in the project.
The other pond, you extended it more westward. There's another pond. I mean,
Correct, it goes this way a little more, yes. So there's a little larger pond into that marsh area there.
Larry, I have a question about basketball courts, and I'm going off of that plan. There's one full court and two half courts, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
He still had a question whether those,
I
baseball was
can
like.
hear you, I can repeat it if you want.
Okay, I didn't hear, you heard me if you answered, but will these fields be lighted?
No, there are no plans for lights at this point.
Okay, thank you.
That is the basketball court.
But where we do have lights on tennis courts, you know, we do allow those to be on until 10 o'clock, but at this point, unless there's a request, it would be sunrise to sunset.
I don't ask because the basketball courts are.
Please speak into the microphone, it's being recorded and Kathleen's out of the room.
The basketball courts are not located anywhere near a street or house. So the 10 o'clock curfew, I don't think would affect any residents with the lights. That's possible.
It's certainly possible. I can pass, it's not too late, I can pass that on to the architects to, you know, look at. You know, it's certainly possible.
Larry, I did sit in on the very beginning vision meetings, and I sat in on the meetings as they progressed. And Wes, one thing that the people in the area were concerned about was lighting. They really didn't want lights.
Why?
They just want it to be quiet after dark. That was my take on it.
Do you guys still walk that park?
Yes, it gets secured every night and opened in the morning. And there will be a new entrance on
Kathy,
via Catherine here, so there will be a gate there also.
Public comments? Okay. Hi, Michelle Bowser.
I appreciate it.
I have a list of questions as usual. One is, I had asked the park, and I know I just asked them a couple days ago, if we could put signs up at the park, because even still now, nobody knows that the pond is being taken away and the new pond is putting in. And I want to make sure that they're not in shock like they were with the trees. So she didn't know that ahead of time. And that's one of my other questions to you is, if you're going to do something major at the park, like taking trees out, even if it's mandatory, even if you think you have no other option, I think San Lorenzo needs to have a heads up. And I would just ask that you keep us more in the loop when things are going on like that.
Okay.
And, one of my other questions is, I just need to get the questions out for the time and then you can answer them. When the other phases come in, do we have any plans right now of bond measures or anything else to complete this part? Because we don't want to sit there with, 10 or 20 years down the road and having it only half done. And that's one of my other questions. And do we have meeting dates yet for the CFP process for either going to the county or the county coming here, or however it's going to be done? Because we want to be involved in that. I know I specifically do. I'm sure board members might want to too, but I do know the community does want to be involved in that. And did you just tell us that the pond area being replaced is part of phase 1 or could be part of phase 1?
So I can answer now?
I'm good.
Okay. First of all, I did get a copy of the email that you sent to one of our board members. And with respect to signs, that's something we typically do as we get closer to construction, especially if there's special funding or something like that. So we will be putting some signs up. We did put up the master plan in the front window of the community center for a number of months. It still may be there now. as we were going through that process, so we will certainly provide some signage. Notice, I believe the association knew about the PG&E. I believe they came and spoke to this group, at least that's my understanding. There were no trees that were cut down that were not going to be part of the renovation project. So part of what PG&E did is they came in and cut down and required to be cut down the trees along the gas line, which were all going to be taken out anyway because that's where the road will be coming in for access. And then as part of that, they did ask if there was anything else Hard wanted to see done. And one thing was we could have planted additional trees on the site, which they would have paid for, or the other option was to prune and cut down other trees that had already been identified as part of the renovation to be taken out. And so the decision was made to have those additional trees pruned and or some removed that were already designated in lieu of having trees planted, because we didn't know yet exactly where the trees might be planted for the future renovation, and planting trees now and then next year tearing them out didn't make a lot of sense. So that was the scope of work that PG&E did. I believe they did do some outreach. This was really a PG&E project, and they also came to our SkyWest golf course and did some work along the same gas line because they are adjacent to each other. With respect to funding, I talked about the $8 million of the $15 million COP that we have for the first phase. There have not been any formal discussions. There have been some discussions at the board workshop level where the board will be discussing the possibility of moving forward with some sort of bond initiative, possibly in 2016. But again, that's not been, voted on or discussed further than some simple discussions. That bond measure would fund projects throughout the entire district, which is, not only what would be remaining at San Lorenzo, but other projects like Fairmont Terrace via Toledo, the East Bay Mud property that we'll be closing escrow on at the end of the month. So those types of things would be what the bond measure might well support. You talked about the CUP. Again, that's a county process. I did receive this card, which I'm sure somebody on staff hopefully received also. I'm trying to see if there's a date on this. So I think this is just the notice, and hopefully they'll be identifying a date where there'll be community input and so forth. That doesn't show it on this card. And maybe that's something Mr. Odonia can talk to at the next meeting. And then your last question was about the existing pond and the new pond. So I believe that in the first phase, the old pond, existing pond will be filled in, and obviously major grading in that area, as well as the construction of the softball complex, basically takes up most of where the pond is, and then the construction of this marsh area and the new pond, and probably this area here. So starting basically from the back of the park and working forward to some point.
Thank you.
Maria Vargas, Villanueva. I just have a comment on the lighting at the basketball courts. I don't live in that area. Have never been to these meetings, but I have been here long enough to see over the years people that live in that area concerned about safety or like when lights go out or something like that. So if you're going to recommend or suggest to the park to have lights there, I highly encourage you to go talk to those people. Because they probably don't want, I don't live there, and as soon as you recommended lights, I was like, no, that's bad. So I do recall over the years, several of the board members are too new to recall that, so we haven't had them recently, but that has been an issue in that area. So I would encourage you to have that dialogue. That's probably what they didn't want lights there for those meetings, it's because of the safety. So.
Good evening, Ernest Delicati via Lucas. Last year, when you went ahead and presented the master plan for the park and everything, I specifically asked you when you were going to be replanting, taking out trees and everything else, whether or not you had gotten with the airport manager, Doug Neely, to go ahead and discuss that. Have you done that as of yet?
That's part of what our engineers will be doing. So because we're still in the design phase, the engineers are still designing things.
Okay.
The whole PG&E issue, came up totally, from them since that time.
Well, if anything, I agree with the comments that we need to be given a heads up on this, because I also want to make sure that you are aware and the board is aware that as your airport representative, for every tree that you go ahead and cut down, that's more noise for San Lorenzo, simply because those trees buffer the noise at the airport. So you need to be cognizant of that. You need to go ahead and get with McNeely, who's the airport manager, to make sure that you've got buy-in, because if not, noise complaints from San Lorenzo are going to increase simply because there are no trees. And right now, because of that clear cut that PG&E went ahead and did, you've got a tremendous amount of rail noise, which used to be buffered by those trees. And now with the trains going through at all hours of the morning, especially between 3 and 5 o'clock in the morning, it's a lot more noticeable to the residents of San Lorenzo. Thank you.
Okay.
I just have to speak out just because, and I've said it before, I love the original San Lorenzo duck pond. I think it's fine the way it is. I don't understand why you don't just upgrade the existing facilities. I don't think you need to get into that much debt. $15 million on a San Lorenzo duck pond to rebuild something that's already great the way it is. I really don't want to see a giant sports complex come into San Lorenzo, but I'm not sure why Hayward Recreational District is deciding to do that. And also, I believe there's going to be a giant, is it an auditorium where you're going to have concerts there too, or am I wrong? Is that not in the plan still?
Well, one of the things, it's not a giant auditorium, but it is an outside area that could be used for small gatherings. I wouldn't say it's it's not a giant auditorium.
Well, you are going to increase an awful lot of traffic flow through San Lorenzo by this plan. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I think that you could just work with maybe $8 million and upgrade the existing park while still keeping our original pond. That pond was built by people in San Lorenzo, and a lot of people are upset that you're filling in the entire pond. If it was well maintained in the first place, we wouldn't be where we're at. If you go to the golf course right on the other side, that golf course is beautiful. Those streets are, the lines are beautiful. You have a pond over there with ducks, and it's really nice. So anyway, I just have to go on record and say that I'm very saddened that you're filling in our duck pond. So, thank you.
Actually, I have one last question I forgot to ask. So, our next item on one of the next items on the agenda is the CUP from Cleveland Wrecking Company, which is the business that's right behind the park, and has hard taken a position. I think what we're going to discuss is, are we going to, when the CUP is, the extension is filed or approved for the Cleveland Wrecking Company, does HARD have a position of them planting any or doing any type of improvements to mitigate since the trees are gone, now we have an ugly view of this wrecking. right there, just on the park. So does the district have any position as far as having them do any improvements so you can't see that?
I was noticed on that, issue, and certainly not, I think, Art and the community would welcome, some sort of buffer on their property.
Yeah. Okay. Clarify, because you mentioned that PG&E gave the option to remove or replace, essentially, the trees along the fence line there, the gas line.
No.
Yeah, you said,
Let me clarify what I said. The trees along the back parallel to the railroad tracks, which is where the gas line runs, that's my understanding, it's a 48-inch high-pressure main line. There was no option given by PG&E. Those trees all had to come out. They now have technology where they can do flyovers or satellite or whatever to be able to see if there's any issues related to the gas line. So all the trees parallel to the railroad tracks along the back fence, continuing down to Sky West along the 3rd fairway, were all taken out because of the gas line. What they offered as an impact to that was either to plant some trees to replace those somewhere else on the site.
okay, so you didn't mention that, you didn't say somewhere else, you just said plant new trees.
On San Lorenzo Park.
Correct.
So I said I didn't know where the master plan and exact locations were going to have for those future trees. And so in lieu of that, they also offered to do some pruning and removal of some trees that we also knew were going to come out because of roadways or, pond or whatever. And those were all along this area here.
You should answer my question, because the first time you didn't specify that it was somewhere else. You just clearly, specifically said replace trees. So that.
Okay, my reference was all at the project at San Lorenzo Community Park.
All right, thank you very much.
I did have a comment, not directly related to this, the park, but to another piece of property that is owned by Hard in San Lorenzo, and that's the lot at Villa Toledo and Hacienda. It's really high with weeds right now, so
Right.
if you might have someone.
I actually drove by there this week and saw that, and I'm already taking that up with my parks supervisor.
We don't want to find you.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.